Hello, I'm Leon Thomas from Renegade Cut. If it isn't clear by now, after 50 or so episodes of my show, I really like talking about movies, and I especially love getting the opinions of other people. On my show, I mostly talk about weird things and strange topics in film, and I rarely talk about the industry itself. But today I'm actually going to talk about the industry. I'm going to talk about Hollywood. Of course, I can't really do that myself. It's not normally what I talk about, so I figured I'd ask my friends.
There's kind of like there's two areas in Hollywood practices that I'd like to address in this question. The first, of course, is the rather more plain movies, like what were great movies, what were terrible movies. Because Sucker Punch was a terrible movie. That was an awful movie. That was just like, I think that anybody like nobody should have given Zack Snyder a job.
Well, for blunders, there's definitely last year's blunder of The Lone Ranger. Oh my god. That was a box office nightmare. I mean, it was so overhyped, and it just became, like, this sensational thing, and they poured so much money into it, and it flopped at the box office. It really did. Like, it didn't make as much money as people thought it would, and, like, the whole question of whether it was true to the content or if it was just a ripoff, and the whole question of Tonto being played by Johnny Depp and all these other things. It just... Hollywood can't just make a movie that they'll think that people will love just because it's based on an old film, like an old film or an old TV series, and just automatically think that it's going to be okay.
I think a lot of people are tired of the toilet humor jokes. A lot of people. And the biggest example I think I've seen for someone who's used it is actually in any Adam Sandler film you could think of. Like Grown Ups 2, when they released their trailer, they had a deer pissing.
Hollywood has absolutely, utterly lost the plot when it comes to redetermining the best way to get their product to the consumer. You know, like, it used to be that you could, like, one of the great things about going to see a movie is that you could go into the theater with your popcorn, you could sit down, and then the movie just started, and it was like 90 minutes of uninterrupted, pure entertainment. You gotta sit through 15 minutes of advertisements before the movie even starts. You know, like, it fails to be convenient in ways that so many other modes of entertainment are. And I think that's why companies like HBO and Showtime are doing really, really well on the television front. I think one of the best things that Hollywood has been able to do in the past decade or so is audience diversification. There are monetizable, marketable groups that exist. One of the bigger examples of this, I feel, is the rise of the superhero movie.
Definitely Marvel's The Avengers.
Avengers, definitely.
Not just because it made $1 billion, which is pretty impressive, but also because it took several movies. It took 5 different movies from across science fiction and war and romance and all these different genres and technological dreams and just shoved them together in one movie that actually worked.
Adaptation of pre-existing licensed material is a tricky thing because you need to be able to make it so that people who are fans of it already when it's not a movie feel inclined to spend money to go see the movie, but then you also need to make sure that people who aren't fans of the source material can go in and not be completely lost by it. And I think that most of the superhero movies that we've actually seen come out in the past 10 years or so manage this successfully.
I don't think we're gonna slow down on sequels or remakes or anything licensed anytime soon.
Hollywood's been really sequel and remake happy forever. How many times have they remade friggin' Shakespeare movies? I mean, there were Shakespeare movies in the 20s. It just seems like in the last couple of years that sequels have really kicked up into high gear. Like, Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, Captain America 2, although Captain America 2 looks amazing.
The short answer is the wheel keeps turning.
I think the biggest problem that Hollywood has right now is that there's so little original content now. I mean, it's always about book adaptations, at least from my point of view. I mean, The Fault in Our Stars is a book adaptation. It's an original concept, but it's based on a book. I mean, indie filmmakers are really good at, coming up with new stuff. Inside Llewellyn Davis, A Serious Man, Fargo, basically anything from the Coen brothers that isn't the remake of True Grit.
For remakes, we are always at the point of expectation that this is gonna freaking suck.
At the same time, there's, the reimaginings, the remakes, which is really just a polite way of saying knockoff, except they're not knockoffs. They're like trying to sell themselves completely on the name of this.
There are still original big budget films, Pacific Rim, for example.
The 2011 the prequel, that movie just smacked of somebody walking into a guy's office and saying, "We want to remake John Carpenter's The Thing," which I know was a reimagining originally. But, I mean, there's a big difference between reimagining something that's like 30 years old and reimagining something that's like 60 years old. So yeah, we want to remake The Thing, and then some guy with money and like a suit made of money going, "Why? That movie's like perfect." And then, the people pitching being like, "How about a prequel?" Because it didn't add anything to it. It pulled everything out of John Carpenter's movie. And that's like, that is the worst example I can think of.
I have 3 words for product placement, and that is Man of Steel. Sears, friggin' 7-Eleven, oh Jesus, I can't even remember how many times I've ever seen that much product placement in a freaking movie. And it really took me out of it, especially during that fight scene, it really took me out of it.
Product placement, for me, in a film, it doesn't really bother me. If I kind of see one piece of it, then I'm like, okay, I know who's the pretty much advertised for the film, who's supporting it. But if you blatantly showcase it, it's gonna get annoying.
When I see a guy walking down the street and he walks by a McDonald's or a Best Buy, I kind of I can recognize it as being the real world, or market it to every day from a variety of different angles. So it's kind of difficult to paint a picture of life and the world without having a certain amount of advertising in it.
But there are exceptions, there are movies where you see product placement, but they're so integrated into the plot, or they're so barely noticeable because it actually works.
There's a certain amount of product placement that I actually find enhances my enjoyment of a movie, which sounds a little weird, but it always pulls me out of the movie when I'm confronted with products, brands, things that people do or eat or use that are so obviously manufactured. Like Fisto Cola, Kablamo shoes. And I can understand using something like that for a good satirical effect. It can also depend on the movie. I think that product placement has less of a place in movies about people. If it's a movie about identity and relationship and growth and change in a person, if it's about ambition, love, product placement I feel has less of a place there, because the movie's supposed to be about people. But if the movie's about stuff, like if the movie's about the world, and if it's about explosions and fighter jets and shovels and fat-free yogurt and tissues and wheelbarrows and squirrels, and government conspiracies, and Velcro, then yeah, you know, like, product placement is okay. Like, if we're watching New York or Chicago be destroyed by a giant goldfish, and the hero is, like, on a hover bike with a really high-tech, state-of-the-art whipped cream gun, then I'm like, if he gets, I don't know, thrown into a Burger King, and then he gets up and, like, blows up a Starbucks, it doesn't bother me so much.
Joss Whedon, the Coen brothers, Gore Verbinski, J.J. Abrams.
Guillermo del Toro.
Of course, there are a couple of directors I feel that kind of, like, skirt that edge, that they still make movies that enthusiasts are like, oh, they're fantastic, but that regular moviegoers can sit down and watch. Regular people can sit down and watch. People just looking to be entertained and be entertained by them. You know, movie makers like Christopher Nolan, who, you know, like, when he gets the reins of his own projects, he always likes to do weird things. You know, like, Memento is a weird movie. The Prestige is a weird movie. Inception is a weird movie. But they all manage to achieve some kind of critical and commercial success.
Originally, Burton has shown for the past 20 years different art styles. He shown that with films like Edward Scissorhands and Night Before Christmas. He can show his creativity and whimsy and nightmarish elements. But somehow down the line, he needs to tone himself down a lot. And the biggest I've seen that he's kind of taken it a little bit too far was Dark Shadows.
Wes Anderson, you know, his movies are always a little offbeat, but he's always got great names and great actors and, like, really great sense of humor, good dialogue, like a superb visual style.
Coen brothers have always made good things. I mean, dude, Big Lebowski, let's be real.
He's probably, as far as I'm concerned, the most important director that's started to see mainstream success in the past 20 years, and that's Quentin Tarantino. I love him, don't get me wrong when I say he's not my favorite director. He's great. And the reason why I say that he's probably the most important director to come out in the last 20 years is that he demonstrates a knowledge of pop culture that comes across in his movies in a way that only he's managed to do.
The Coen brothers and Joss Whedon, to me, I'm not a fanboy of either, but neither can they do no wrong for me.
I hope we learn from our mistakes from the past few years.
As the cost of making movies gets higher and higher, Hollywood has to find better ways to incentivize the customer to purchase. Because we live in a world where people are far more concerned with convenience than almost anything else when it comes to consuming their media. And if people are going to start making, you know, more and more and more and more and more and more and more money, there needs to be a way to reel in that much money to pay for it. And if Hollywood could realize that a little better and start reeling in some money costs, and maybe embrace this concept of alternative forms of distribution. You know, like I heard there've been a couple of test screenings in the Greater Vancouver area where you can go and see a movie like a month to like 2 weeks to a month before it comes out. But you drop like $50 on a ticket, and you get this like beautiful theater with like leg room and plush seats that recline, and you get like a bag of swag and all these things, and it's like, yeah, okay, I can see that for like your enthusiast audience to do that and be like, I saw the movie a month before anybody. That's great. But it takes a lot to drag me to the theater these days, you know? It's got to be something special. It really, really does. And that's that's something that I don't think Hollywood is primed for.
Honestly, I think it'll be fine, but I think that the whole sequels thing really needs to change. Now, I know that sequels have been around forever, and I really can't, like, be upset about that, but I really think that the Hollywood machine really needs to rethink their system. I mean, at least get some inventive filmmakers who know what they're doing. I really am looking for somebody who's more like Kubrick, honestly. Or George Méliès, honestly. If we're gonna go all the way back, let's go all the way back to 1900 with George Méliès.
I'm optimistic about movies for children. Frozen, Despicable Me 2 recently came out and were amazing. I'm more iffy about films targeted exclusively for adults.
They need to reel in costs. They need to adjust their distribution methods. They need to keep following this diversification. Like, we need to start seeing more movies by different types of people, for different groups of people, you know, like more women directors, more multi-ethnic directors. We've got to start seeing a wider net. Or no, maybe not a wider net, but more modest nets, at least, like more amounts of them, but modestly sized. Because a wider net would be like, he was one man that was in love with a woman, they were distanced from each other, and they find meaning in their relationship, but only after he shoots a bunch of guys. And his funny clown sidekick entertains the kids. And I'm not sure I'd watch that movie.
Well, that settles all of that. I believe we have completely solved Hollywood today.